What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. You know, we do make a lot of videos about reworks these days. I love taking a look at some of the upcoming and future reworks because there's a lot of really exciting stuff due for release in the next upcoming year or so in terms of reworks. 2016, pretty much the year of reworks in League of Legends. But there's actually quite a lot of reworks that ended up being completely cancelled or partially cancelled. We wanted to show off some of the reworks that didn't make it into League of Legends, of course, because these cancelled reworks are actually quite big indicators of what maybe Riot wanted to do with the champion, even if they didn't actually make it work the first time they attempted designing it. And if you guys enjoyed the video, definitely hit that like button, and let's begin. So first up, our cancelled rework is Kog'Maw. Okay, so not really, but Riot essentially decided that they just fucked up this champion so hard, so they are hitting that undo button, taking away the big changes to Kog'Maw from his original rework. Since this is a video for cancelled reworks rather than really unreworks, Kog'Maw, it's kind of just a joke. We're not really counting that one. So our first cancelled rework is actually Riven. Riven's rework was pretty small scale actually, and it was based around giving her a more interesting passive to play with. She was given an experimental passive that shared a theme with her old one, while also generating a new resource called Edge. So essentially, whenever she used an ability, she would deal an extra 30% physical damage on her next basic attack, similar to her old passive. But if she hit an enemy champion with a basic attack that was empowered by that passive, she would now instead gain 20 Edge. All of Riven's damage, not just auto attacks, was then boosted by up to 10% based on how much edge she had. So at 20 edge, she'd deal 2% extra damage with her abilities and attacks. If Riven didn't gain any edge for 10 seconds, she would lose 10 edge every second. So it was kind of like her own version of maybe the Fury mechanic that you would find on other champions like Renekton and Gnar. The passive also had a really cool interaction with her ultimate's Wind Slash. Originally, it maybe dealt bonus damage based on how low on health an enemy champion was, giving it kind of like this execute effect. Originally, it dealt bonus damage based on how low on health an enemy champion was, making it kind of like this execution ability, but that also made it kind of awful in a lot of situations, and potentially overkill on others. Instead, it was changed to consume all of Riven's edge and deal more damage based on how much edge she had. So this rework actually made it all the way to the PBE, and there's actually some footage out there of this actual rework taking place. And there's not entirely a whole lot of information on why Riot decided to cancel this mini rework, but Riot Reckless Abandon tweeted out and said that, well, this Riven testing was done for the cycle, and the changes were reverted for now. But to be honest, this rework was tested such a long time ago that although they could potentially come back again for more testing in the future, it's just been such a long time that there's no way this rework hasn't at least been iceboxed, if not cancelled altogether. And since it wasn't exactly the biggest rework ever, it is actually kind of possible that maybe we see it come into the game in the future in a class roster update. Next up, we're taking a look at another fairly small rework, this time to Lissandra, which was a rework that essentially focused on her passive. So we found out about this one from Riot Meddler about 2 years ago, while they were planning some small buffs to her sustain damage and testing out a new defensive passive rather than the free spell that she gets now. So the idea was to give her an ability that gave her a way to survive against ranged matchups, because all of her spells really just have such a low range, and one of her spells even kind of puts her in the middle of a fight, so she really needed a way to survive the laning phase versus other ranged champions. So the aim was to give her some maybe reward for her landing crowd control on an enemy, similar to the way her passive currently works, but it really just ended up not working out. Since this was, 2 years ago, it's fair to consider that this little rework to her passive is pretty much cancelled completely. Now, a couple of years back, Riot apparently did some exploration into a Shaco rework, with changes being fairly exclusive to his gameplay, so it wasn't really a full-size project with the goal of releasing the perfect new Shaco. It was way more relaxed and kind of approached fairly casually, a very brainstormy sort of way. The idea was to find a new direction for Shaco as a champion, just kind of to see what would be possible with the stealthy trickster sort of theme. So we can assume Riot came up with some interesting things to test out for Shaco, otherwise it would have been a huge waste of time, but the plans never really worked out, despite the fact that this rework was in development for quite a long time actually. Riot have said that after cancelling this rework, when they decide to later revisit Shaco in the future, it's probably going to be just a full-scale visual and gameplay update, since he is pretty outdated in a lot of aspects really. But his kit has actually kind of stood the test of time pretty well, so it'll be interesting to see what they actually end up changing with him. Another stealthy champion due for a rework that we talked about quite recently actually is Evelynn, but she was actually meant to get a rework back in 2011 that was eventually cancelled. Now, to be fair, Evelynn did receive a rework in 2012, so it's pretty clear that this rework wasn't fully cancelled, but it was actually iceboxed for a certain period of time. She was actually fully set up for release. I mean, her ability tooltips were updated, and they changed her back a day later actually after releasing the rework, and her rework was called off completely. You know, Riot Ezreal at the time said that the problem was that she just hadn't been tested internally enough. And they were worried that the rework was just going to turn her into even more of a pub stomper than she already was at the time. So they pulled back the rework, decided to just release some nerfs for her so that they could check on her without really letting her go totally out of control. And from there, she would go on to be in such a crazy state of one of the most underpowered champions League has ever seen for about a year actually, until they could bring back, revive the rework, and fully complete and release it. To be fair though, I mean, we've seen a ton of releases, you know, both of new champions of reworks that have just been crazy overpowered when they actually did hit the live servers. So the Evelynn rework honestly must have been just insane to get cancelled at the last minute like that. She's still due for some attention in the future from Riot, but from what we've heard, she also is going to get some quality of life updates in the Assassin roster update, as well as potentially changes from the stealth update that is coming in the Assassin roster update as well, that Riot has been teasing for quite some time now. As for full rework, she's almost certainly getting one in 2017, but that one's quite a ways off, so we're not entirely sure what's going to happen with that one just yet. But who knows, this upcoming Evelynn rework might actually change her quite a bit. And so the last champion we're taking a look at today is a little bit similar to Evelynn in the sense that the original rework wasn't completely cancelled, just the original versions of the rework were cancelled. And of course that champion that we're taking a look at is Urgot. And this is actually the reason that his rework has been in development for pretty much forever actually, and he'll almost certainly get a completely different rework next year. So Riot Xenon gives us some insights into one of the original plans for Urgot's rework. It is an ability that we've talked about a little bit before, of his magical missile splitter. So the idea was that it was an ability that worked sort of like a Jace gate, but instead of speeding up allies, it would multiply any allied projectiles that passed through it, which meant that if an Ashe fired her ultimate into it, 3 ultimate arrows would come out the other side, kinda like a volley. And it's probably one of the coolest ideas for an ability ever, but it was just gonna be absolutely 100% impossible to balance, that it would just make him a must-play champion for teams forever, really. And it was just also a nightmare to code as well. It was super buggy, you know, every missile in the game would have to be coded to work properly with it, and that means every new champion, every upcoming rework gets tons of extra development just to make sure that it doesn't completely break the game with the Urgot Jace gate. So when we do eventually get an Urgot rework, it's not going to feature his legendary missile splitter, but hopefully they do come up with something interesting. And one thing we know for sure is that Riot decided to get the artists and writers for the game to team up with the designers for his rework, so it's pretty likely that they'll figure out a cool new theme for Urgot, and then work backwards to develop gameplay for him that suits his new theme. Anyway, that's just about going to wrap things up for this video. You know, I'm always interested in taking a look at things like this, so definitely let us know some comments below about maybe which rework you would like to see make it into the game in the future. And looks like that's going to be it for me. If you guys enjoyed the video, drop a like, subscribe if you want. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.